Hello again. So we've heard the term African spirituality, but what does it mean, especially in the context of traditional healing? To help us unpack this, now I'm joined in studio by traditional healer Kitulezi Gwangwa and Bishop Joshua Maponga. Sanbonani, Timela. Okay, so when we talk about African spirituality, what are we talking about?
Firstly, maybe we need to be very clear that we don't allow our spirituality, our way of existence to be defined by Eurocentric terminology, where you're basically looking at African culture through white glasses. African spirituality must not be looked in the same frame of religion, which is schizophrenic by nature, where you go to church on a Sunday, on a Saturday, you take off your clothes, and then you live your life as you please in the course of the week. Spirituality has to do with lifestyle, combination of not just culture and celebration, putting on a few clothes, and one day per year in September, is it October, where it's Africa Month, Africa Day, then people try to buy some little white cloth, black material, and then they walk around and say, we are Africans. I think that's quite a commercial way of an adulterated nation that has lost its soul. African spirituality has to do with the total lifestyle. When you're talking about being a European, for example, it's your Valentines, it's your Halloweens, it's your birthdays, it's your whatever. What constitutes a Jew? It's your Shabbats, it's your Hanukkahs, it's your Passovers, and etc. What constitutes a Mexican? But all of a sudden, when you come to Africans, we're the only group of people on the face of the continent whose lifestyle must be determined by our colonizers, and our independence seemed to give us a small little leave from ourselves to become like the other, and once in a while then they give us a holiday of when to celebrate ourselves. And I think that's quite an abusive way of looking at how democratization, industrialization, communism, capitalism, neo-colonialism, neo-imperialism, name all the isms you can mention, how they've come actually to rape and force the African child to become that which is not like himself.
With that context, Kitulezia, Bishop Joshua, you still find, though, within the black community, some black people who will say, or who will challenge what the bishop is talking about, especially when we speak in the context of traditional healers. He mentioned something that is important, what we give names to things. So, how work a traditional healer, kasisutukeng, kasizulukeng, inyanga, ngaka. So, what are we talking about there, essentially?
Wow. For me, when we look at, because you announced me as a traditional healer, so that for me is an umbrella term, because there are many traditional systems and forms of healing that exist globally. There's your shamanism, there's your Buddhism, there's different kinds of traditional healer in all spectrum, all over the globe. But when you come to South Africa, particularly, when you look at Isangoma, it's the child of the song, the spirit song, Ingoma. So, Sangoma, do you understand what I'm saying? So, Kasisutu kingaka, Kasizulu inyanga. But that's also contentious. I say that the definition of it is something to explore in a different time, I guess. We are the ones to define ourselves. We are the ones to say this is who we are. And I think for me there's a lot that's been lost in terms of people coming in, anthropologists coming in and interpreting their perspective of what they think and feel our traditional ways are. And a lot has been lost in translation. But for me to be actually in this space where we have this question today as to what is traditional healing and what are the trends and such, I go back to the saying, the popular saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And nobody questions what the Romans do when they're in Rome. So why are we questioning what the Africans do when they're in Africa? Do you understand what I'm saying? So let's just leave it there for now.
Are we interested, though, in who we are? I ask you that because I'll tell you, among professionals, perhaps let me not speak for everybody in my space of what I've observed. When you speak about consulting a traditional healer, you are looked at funny. It's things that we don't even talk about. You don't even broach that subject because it's a dark space.
But that wasn't always so. And it became a dark space because missionaries came in and they had to conquer a people and they had to conquer their mind, their spirituality. They had to eliminate their belief systems and take them wholly. And so they took one space and looked at their traditional ways and told them that they're barbaric and that they're behind and that they are blasphemous and satanic. But there was a time when there weren't Western doctors that had scientific research to support their ways, where communities relied on traditional healers, when there was no other option on how you healed a person and how you heal them spiritually, emotionally, physically, in every other way. So why does it then at some point become an issue? When did we then take one opinions over some? Again, anthropologists come and interpret our ways, you know, in a particular way.
Yeah.
They come to eliminate that belief system.
Bob Joshua, as you find in religion, you will find with every good there's bad, right? So you find pastors whom people would think are good, and then you'll find pastors who feed people grass, snakes, and whatnot. So in the space of traditional healing, for lack of a better word, do we find there's good and there's bad? As a person, how do you distinguish ukuthi la ngize kumuntu right noma la khona okungashaya amanzi?
When you actually use those, when it comes to definitions of traditional healing, for semantical purposes or semantics, let's agree that the word traditional healing, what is European healing is also traditional healing in their own context, and what is African healing is traditional in our own context. What is traditional weddings in Europe? It's white weddings. What is traditional weddings in Africa? It's traditional. So I wanted us to maybe to just classify or clarify on the word. Though when we use it for Africans, it's derogative. But anyway, let's come to the question you're asking. How do you know what is right? How do you know what is wrong? The right and wrong are dealing with ethics and morality. And the question is, who determines what is right? Who determines what is wrong? The growth of any community has what I might want to term the four pillars of community development. Firstly, becomes the infrastructure, the physical structures of a community. You come to the software, the mental, the HR, the mind frame, and the education systems that goes on to develop people who live in this infrastructure. Thirdly comes the socializing of the people in that infrastructure. And fourthly, then comes the spirituality of those people in that infrastructure. Now, if you have a problem with 1 and 2, that we have moved people away from their traditional homes. You have moved them into urbanization. You have educated them in a frame in which you think they must be in, so that they can fit into the global village you want them to live in. Now their community and social status has been altered. You are now asking me a very sensitive question. How do you know what is spiritually right? When in fact, physically, mentally, and culturally you are dispossessed. You no longer even have the antenna to understand what is it that made you sick, for example. What is it that caused the problem that you have? You cannot therefore come around and try to find the ethics of what is right and what is wrong when you don't even have a definition of, are you sick pharmaceutically, psychologically, maritally, historically? Where's the disease? And I think, with all due respect, I'm coming from a religious perspective, but I tend to have a great respect for people who are working there, the Department of Spirituality, who don't just look at Tati Kambi, Nigezumunda Pulze, and that's it. They would want to find out exactly where could the problem be. And I think that's where even our doctors need to start being sensitive. When you're dealing with an African patient, you're not just dealing with a diabetic patient. You're just dealing with someone who's got a gangrene on their foot. What could be other causes of this, so that the healing becomes holistic? So when you're asking me right and wrong, I think that question is very superficial. You are right on the top side of just saying, is it right to go and say Sangoma? Is it right to go to a church? Is it right to go to a church? That's another question. Or are we now saying, because we have now become Christianized, anything else that is not Christian? It's almost like this democracy thing is a lie, because it comes to abuse everything else that is on the system, and only it remains as an acceptable format of social,
Right. Perhaps I framed the question wrong. I think essentially what I'm trying to find out is when you go to someone, whichever departments of healing you go to, addiction thrives in secrecy, or bad things thrive in secrecy because asazi angisho. So uzongena kuyinto ocabanga ukuthi into right, but uma usungena ngaphakathi you realize ukuthi actually something is not right here. So I guess the question essentially, when you have the calling, how do you trust that this person indeed la uze kwa right?
You don't have to teach a lion to be a lion. You don't teach a chicken to be a chicken. The spiritual sensitivity of any human being must be of such a state that when you are meeting right and wrong, your conscience should be able to talk to you at a very fundamental level. In all the bucket of words I've been trying to say, the teaspoon of sense I've been trying to share with you, is that our spiritual maturity and growth has been so warped and so confused that at the end of the day, the quality of our education, our socializing, our politics, our diet, and everything else has actually numbed our senses. And now you're asking me, how do you know if you're doing right or wrong? Yeah, it's like asking a drunk person, how do you know where you are? Our society is drunk and intoxicated with Eurocentric information to an extent that we cannot even decipher who we are. Later on, to try to find an ethical compass and GPRS of spirituality, I think we're actually in a much bigger mess than you can ask me.
Sure. Kituletse, and then there's an aspect of same-sex couples within the space. What is your opinion on it? What is your take on that?
So, for me, my understanding, and which is also very... I don't think it's easy for a lot of people to accept, but same-sex or homosexuality is not something new to African culture. It has just been dealt in a different way. It was not something that was brought to the forefront, and there's a lot of secrecy, obviously, in some spaces. But it was always found out, for example, when a young woman or a young man went to their initiation and found out, okay, you are made in this way. They would say perhaps that you have dual spirituality. Or, do you understand? Not necessarily even that you have to go in twasa, but that your feminine energy is more prominent or your masculine energy is more prominent. And then, but there was always in terms of the community of the African people that you must produce offspring. That was the requirement. You must have a lineage that takes the name and such, and those are the things that were not compromised. What you do in your private life, that was not a thing that was brought to the fore. And in fact, more often than not, you'll find those people would live then with the sangomas, so that because the sangoma understands your life and your lifestyle and protects you in that way, so that you're not engaging with the community at large to be ridiculed or to be questioned or to be that. But that the sangoma is the one who understands the spirituality behind that. With that said, it becomes for me difficult to have to say that it means that every single gay person or anybody in the LGBTQ community is particularly spiritual in the way that they have to be a sangoma or that they're recognized in that way. But there was always an understanding of energy in terms of your feminine and your masculine, and that both can reside within you. One more than another, regardless of what your genitalia is. So for me, it translates in that way. And for spirituality is for me a science. I do look at it in that way. It is one of the first knowledge systems that Africans created and put on this world.
Right.
But
so Joshua, I want to get your thoughts on that. But before that, can we just play this clip for our viewers? Let's take a look, listen.
For me, the grandest thing about being in a relationship, Nokoko, is like, it's beyond love. It's beyond a relationship, because our ancestors get along, first of all. So spiritually, we're incredibly compatible, aligned, we're very spiritually aligned, which then makes everything else fall into place, which makes the physical and the emotional easier. It's never easy, but it just makes it work. It makes it click. Like, there is no question in my mind that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with this woman.
But Joshua, should we even be questioning it?
I'm not at liberty to be so liberal on this subject. I have a pending case right now in one of the constitutional courts on this subject matter. However, the issue of maleness and femaleness of people, the yang, the yin and the yang, the positive and the negative, the duality of life in its very essence, allows me as a theologian and a social observer to say, over and above entertainment and social mispositions of genetic nature, there is function which builds a community together, there is function that is allowed even the people of defect, so to speak, and I want to put that selectively so, or different sort of disposition, to be also given an opportunity to survive. They are human beings as we are. But when it comes to the basic rule of function, there is no production, as she rightfully put it. There's nothing that has come out of those relationships that takes a generation forward. So are families functional? Are human beings functional? Or they've become a dead end? So when you look at a relationship of that nature, which has become solely a spiritual nature, and the spirituality has become so active to such an extent that all other functions of longevity, posterity, and etc. have been brought to a standstill, will the society allow this person to go on extinct on the basis of spirituality? Or society has always been struggling to realign people towards continuity of themselves into the next generation. But however, with the amount of democracy that we have now and the amount of freedom that we have in terms of expression, people are free to explore. And by the way, to explore other forms of lifestyle. I might not have a problem with what she's saying, actually, where this is a spiritual connection. I have a problem with the commercial ones, who are here today and they're there tomorrow, and they're there the other day, and then they get pregnant, and the relationships fail, and then finally they're ending up and says, no, I have a calling. So it looks like our society, our youth, particularly in the quest of looking for their identity, they are now exploring spirituality. And I beg to be corrected by the spiritualists, but I think the quality of the spirit that you attract on yourself and the sex of that spirit somehow overrides even your physicality. Yes. So that you might, and all of a sudden it totally becomes feminine. I know some few guys who totally become feminine. So when you enter spirituality, there is I'm still learning also. I'm a student of psychology and anthropology, but I would like to state as a hypothesis that depending on the spirit, people say spirits are sexless. But I beg to differ. The sex of the spirit, the sex of the ancestor, the sex of whatever you imbibe on you overrides your sex. You are lucky if it's male on male, then your maleness comes up. But if you are a male and the ukoko sits on you, you're most likely going to end up acting feminine. And on the other side, if you are female and umkhulu sits on you, then all of a sudden the male in you comes out. So spirituality for me, it cannot be sexless. And hence maybe, will it be okay for me to ask you, madam, if it is possible to say, allow the ladies to be possessed by the ladies and the men to be possessed by the men. But immediately there's a cross-section of sexuality. There is a whole new ball game that comes on this, what might call same-sex and gayism and etc. and LGBT. It's my own observation. I beg to be corrected, and I'm not a student thoroughly of this, so I mention it with a pinch of salt. But from where I'm sitting on, when you're experimenting with your spirituality, be careful. Some of these experiments might end up actually giving you a lifestyle. And there is also commercialization of this whole concept of spiritualization. Then you end up with some few necklaces around your neck and some few breastlets and etc. and some few wigs. Now I'm saying no coco, some saying twasile. The other people think it's entertainment. But from where I'm sitting, it cannot be entertainment. This thing is as serious and as real as reality itself. And if you walk in there and you don't know what you're looking for, you may end up coming back with other things that you don't know.
Want me to reply?
Very quickly for Aski, see if we can, very quickly for us.
I think it becomes very difficult to try and govern a person's personal interpretation of their spirituality. I think that, just as you said, that I don't think we should be in that space determining whether a goko or a male or a what should be. It's much more complex than that, because even in my feminine energy, I can be attracted to another feminine person, and it's the complexity of that is not determined on. It's not about gender lines and gender links. And how to conform in those spaces. We have to go as far back as this being originally even a very matriarchal kind of space and system. That's where it was formed, you know. And women form communities and men form communities. And they link up in certain procreative spaces, mainly. It's much more complex than that. It's extremely much more complex. And I think that the exploration of the youth, it needs to be guided, yes, but I don't think this is something, nobody says, I'm big, I'm going to be a sangoma. This is way too difficult a thing, and it changes your core so extremely that it's not a thing that somebody can just jump into. And when you come out, and you find a way to interpret it within yourself, with how it fits with who you are, that is when it's most authentic to you. Whether that lasts or whether it doesn't matter, but that's at that moment with who you are at that time, how you are able to interpret it and make sense of this thing for yourself. It's a very personal thing.
But I think where I was trying, just 2 minutes, where I was trying to tweak in is where we are living in our flats in Senton, in Sunning Hill, surrounded by each home is it.
Yeah.
Then you have all these questions you're asking. Instead of being in a traditional space where uncles and aunts are there, the social structures that understand.
They don't have that upbringing.
I'm coming to that. Where you actually have the system around you that can assist you to identify and even notice some of the traits that you have from your family backgrounds and your roots and etc. We actually have a dislocated or a disjoined, off-planted young man who is in Joburg, who is in Pretoria all by themselves. And they all begin to hear all these things. And in the midst of trying to interpret them, instead of maybe often to go back to their own roots and reconnect and really find, they end up in Soweto with some gogo. They end up in Shotanguve with some gogo, who is quickly trying to take them through some spiritual journey. That's where particularly I have a problem with that. Because that system on its own, how do you just jump across the line? And I would suggest that if there is such a thing, if there's a young person out there, young man, who begins to feel in this space, you cannot do these things by alienating or running away from your own traditional, your own family setting, your own homestead. Some of the problems you're having, some of your family members in the past have had those problems, and solutions are sitting right there. But to be sitting around, tweeting around your WhatsApp and Facebook, and the next thing, selfie here, and the necklace on your neck, and I find that to be slightly complex.
With that, we have unfortunately run out of time, and we're all learning, right? And it's great to learn from each other. I think it was Tandi Somazwai who said, and that reawakening is important, and it starts with having a conversation, I guess, somewhere. And that was Bishop, traditional healer, beg your pardon, Kituletse Kwangwa, and Bishop Joshua Maponga, African spirituality being our topic this morning.